Have you ever wondered if the guy who literally built the digital age is a visionary savior or a ruthless monopolist? It's a question that's kind of shadowed him for half a century. I mean, we're talking about a guy who spent the first half of his career as a fiercely polarizing tech titan, just crushing competitors and going toe-to-toe with the federal government. But then you look at him today, and he's spending the second half of his life giving away one of the largest personal fortunes in human history to wipe out global diseases. It's a wild pivot. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're looking past the headlines to unpack the full, completely complex legacy of Bill Gates. We're going to trace the whole shebang, from an obsessed teenage hacker to the architect of a software monopoly, right up to his current era as an AI and climate philanthropist. All right, let's dive right in. Chapter 1, The Obsessive Teenage Hacker. So to really understand the man, we first got to understand the kid in Seattle who found a terminal obsession. 160. That's Bill Gates' estimated IQ, and he backed it up with a staggering 1590 out of 1600 on his SATs. But raw brain power wasn't his only defining trait. It was this relentless, borderline obsessive competitiveness. As a kid, he'd organized these highly competitive family athletic games, and by his early teens, he was literally sneaking out of his bedroom window at night just to get his hands on a teletype computer terminal at his prep school, Lakeside. He was brilliant for sure, but he was absolutely consumed by what machines could do. And things moved incredibly fast for this young prodigy. Back in 1968, he's writing a basic tic-tac-toe program. By 1970, at just 15 years old, he and his buddy Paul Allen are actually getting paid $20,000 for a program called Trafo-Data that monitored Seattle traffic patterns. He heads off to Harvard in 1973, but instead of going to class, he's staying awake for 36 hours straight in the computer lab. By 1975, he spots the Altair 8800 minicomputer in a magazine, and boom, he drops out of Harvard with Paul Allen to found Microsoft. It was right around this time that his really aggressive business streak first showed up. See, in 1976, the culture among computer hobbyists was totally about freely sharing code. Gates absolutely rejected that. He wrote this fiery open letter demanding that people pay for his software, arguing that piracy would, and I quote, prevent good software from being written. He was only in his early 20s, but he already hit the nail on the head. The real money wasn't in the hardware. It was in owning and licensing the software that made the hardware run. Chapter 2, Building the Microsoft Monopoly. Now, to understand this era, we really have to look at one single brilliant strategic maneuver that basically crowned him the king of personal computing. Picture this. It's 1980, and the massive computing giant IBM needs an operating system for their new personal computers. Gates goes out, buys an existing software program for $50,000, tweaks it, and offers it to IBM. But here's the absolute masterstroke. Instead of selling the software outright to IBM, Microsoft kept the source code and the rights. They charged IBM a licensing fee for every single machine sold, meaning when other companies inevitably started cloning the IBM PC, Microsoft could just license that exact same MS-DOS software to all of them. And that three-step blueprint completely crushed the competition. First, locking in that MS-DOS deal gave them total dominance. Second, as Apple and others started messing around with graphical interfaces, using a mouse and on-screen windows, Gates aggressively pivoted and launched Microsoft Windows in 1985. And third, he took Microsoft public in 1986. At just 30 years old, Bill Gates became an instant millionaire. Inside the company, he was known for this confrontational, white-hot management style. He'd frequently tell employees their ideas were the stupidest things he'd ever heard, mostly just to test their conviction. Chapter 3, Power, Trials, and Controversies. Because, as you might guess, with that immense, unchecked corporate power came intense public scrutiny and a pretty dramatic climax to his business reign. The 1990s were just an absolute battlefield for Gates. He had effectively built a monopoly, and the Federal Trade Commission and the Justice Department came after Microsoft hard. The core accusation here was that Microsoft was using its massive market share to force PC makers to bundle their web browser, Internet Explorer, which ultimately froze out competitors like Netscape. At the peak of this antitrust trial, Gates was facing the very real threat of the US government splitting his empire right down the middle. They eventually settled, but his public image as a ruthless, win-at-all-cost competitor was pretty much permanently cemented. And over time, that intense public scrutiny eventually bled into his personal life too. In 2021, he and Melinda French Gates divorced after 27 years of marriage. He also faced heavy media scrutiny regarding meetings he took with Jeffrey Epstein starting in 2011. For his part, Gates has publicly stated that he engaged in nothing illicit, but the fallout of these personal shifts definitely continued, like in 2024 when Melinda officially resigned from her role at their joint charitable foundation. Chapter 4: Reinvention, Philanthropy, and AI. But to get the full picture of the man today, we have to witness a massive pivot. We see the aggressive CEO step down to completely reinvent himself into a global philanthropic visionary. He said, "Money has no utility to me beyond a certain point." Now think about that. That's a profound statement from a guy who spent his youth ruthlessly accumulating wealth and crushing corporate competitors. It brilliantly captures this total shift into psychology. Influenced heavily by his mother and philanthropists like Andrew Carnegie, Gates basically realized he had an obligation to give his fortune away rather than just hoard it. Do you remember this number? 31. That's the age Bill Gates became the world's youngest billionaire back in 1987. But to truly understand his reinvention, we can't just look at how much he made. We have to look at the sheer, unprecedented scale of what he's giving away today. $77.6 billion. That's the total amount of lifetime grants funded by the Gates Foundation as of recent reports. It's a staggering amount of money. Gates actually stepped down from the day-to-day operations of Microsoft in 2000 specifically to focus on this. He's aggressively applying that exact same obsessive, data-driven mindset he used to build software, but now he's using it to eradicate diseases like polio and tuberculosis and to combat infant mortality all around the globe. And his modern focus goes way beyond traditional charity. He's looking directly at existential threats to humanity. Over in energy and climate, he spent over $1 billion backing TerraPower, a company trying to build next-generation nuclear reactors. In artificial intelligence, he remains a key technology advisor at Microsoft, helping guide the integration of tools like Copilot, which he honestly believes will revolutionize productivity and global education. And in global health, he continues to push for major breakthroughs in vaccines and maternal care. Basically, he is trying to engineer solutions for the world's most complex future problems. So that leaves us with a final, incredibly complex question. What will his legacy truly be? Is he the relentless capitalist who monopolized the digital revolution for his own gain? Or is he the visionary who realized his supreme wealth was best spent saving millions of lives and funding our future? Perhaps the reality is just that you can't have one without the other. It's a fascinating paradox to leave you with today. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the history behind the headlines.